Hello, hello, everyone. We'll just give everyone a few minutes to join the room, but you're very welcome into our global webinar. As we're waiting for everyone to join in, maybe you can let us know where you're joining in from. Great to see when people are joining from all various parts of Canada. Nova Scotia, beautiful. On the West Coast, in Vancouver, same as me. Alberta, someone's watching from Morocco. Wow, we've got someone overseas. Really, truly global. All right, we'll definitely we'll try get started now. So welcome to our first global webinar of 2025, How to Craft a Winning Pitch. I'm Isabel Nolan. I'm the Director of Programs here at Startup Canada. So to begin, I would like to acknowledge the land on which I'm on today, which is located on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, also known as Vancouver. And as we are a national organization, I'd also like to acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples. And I encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territory that you're residing on today. Today's session is being recorded, and this recording will be shared afterwards via our YouTube channel. And all of the links that we'll share in the chat, so all of the resources that you see, will be added to our Startup Global resource guide. And as I can see you're already doing, we're inviting you all to introduce yourselves in the chat, connect with each other. Feel free to share your LinkedIn and where you're joining in from, which again, you're already doing. Only thing I'll say is just make sure to check that you're sending messages to everyone in the room. There's a default that you'll send it to just hosts and panelists. So I want to make sure that everyone is talking to each other and not just us. So a little bit about Startup Canada. We're a national nonprofit that's the gateway to Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. We're here to connect you, the entrepreneurs, with the support community and tools that you need to build a successful business in Canada. And Startup Global is one of Startup Canada's flagship programs that supports entrepreneurs looking to export and expand their businesses internationally. From webinars like today's, roundtables, and our annual pitch competition, this free program will help you build an international market entry strategy and plan. Quick thank you to our wonderful partners, our co-presenting partners, UPS and Export Development Canada, our program partner, TD, and our community partners, our program partners, TD and Forum for International Trade Training, and our community partners, GS1 Canada, Communitech, and WeBC. So today's conversation is focused on preparing for the Startup Global 2025 pitch competition, which is definitely the biggest focus that the Startup Global program brings year over year. So this is really for those interested in applying to pitch and participate. So we'll cover all the information that you'll need, all the tips to help guide you into crafting that perfect pitch for your business, and to help you get some cash into your pockets and truly help you along your exporting journey. We've prepared some questions for our wonderful panelists. However, if you do have a question, if I can ask you to write it in the Q&A box, you'll find it on the lower part of your screen. It just helps us to filter through the questions rather than putting them into the chat. And I'll make sure to do my best to answer everyone's questions as best as we can. So without further ado, I'm honored to introduce our speakers today. We have Thierry, who is the CEO and co-founder of Happly AI. Thierry won first place at our Moncton pop-up pitch in 2024. We have Rashmi, who is the CEO and founder of Aruna Revolution, and she won first place at our Halifax pop-up pitch in 2023. And winning first place at both of those competitions meant they also had a guaranteed spot at the grand finale of those respective years. So lots of knowledge and tips and tricks that they can teach you on how to truly craft a winning pitch. And then our third speaker is Lora. She is a certified international trade professional, but also works with Forum for International Trade Training as their partnerships and community lead. And Laura was a judge throughout the whole pitch competition last year. So she has seen quite a few pitches. So is definitely one of the best people to advise you on what the judges are looking for and how can you really catch their attention, as well as ensuring that you're fulfilling every part of the criteria that she's looking at when she's listening to your pitch. So thank you, the three of you, for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedules to be here with us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
For having us.
So my first questions, I'm going to be focusing on the preparing your pitch. So Rashmi and Thierry, I'm going to be picking on you for a few minutes first. Rashmi, can I go to you first in terms of what your core message was that you wanted to convey in your pitch, and how did you ensure that it was clear and it was concise, given the 3-minute time limit as well?
Yeah, so when I was actually doing my pitch, I think our time limit was less. I think it might have been 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So it was really important for us to make sure that we prepared a pitch and made sure we were getting all the core messages across. But for us, it was the global scale of the work that we were doing. It's really important to include that in your pitch as well, because I think sometimes we think that we're just a small company that can solve a problem in Nova Scotia or Canada, or but it's actually a global scale that we can solve a problem on. And so what I did in order to prepare for my pitch is, firstly, I just looked at the judging criteria. So it lists exactly what they're looking for, and what you can do is you can craft your pitch around that. You can make sure that you've got sentences that include answers to all of the questions that they're looking for in the judging criteria. But then at the same time, make sure that you're communicating your passion and what you're working on really effectively. I think for us, one thing that I always try to do is try to think about how I would feel receiving this pitch. Like, is it boring? Like, I try to listen to myself doing the pitch and I'm like, am I engaged? Am I bored? And so I always try to have some kind of, I guess, hook to start the pitch off with. And for me, I remember for Startup Canada, it was literally, I was on my period one day. And so that's not something that you talk about often. And so people are like, what are you talking about? And I feel like that kind of got people engaged a little bit more and kind of helped with the conversation. But coming up with a good hook, making sure that you're being clear, concise, showing your passion, and meeting all the judging criteria.
Absolutely. And I think you're dead right in terms of like having that hook like from the get-go as well. You're kind of not only for the judges but the audience watching as well. You're kind of making them like sit up and stand to attention, like, oh, okay, we're in. We're listening to your story. Like, it's grabbing everyone's attention. And I still remember that pitch. Thierry, how about yourself in terms of conveying that core message?
Yeah, for me, I start every single pitch. I've pitched all over the world. I start every single pitch with emotions. One of my mentors told me, he said, if you're able to grasp people's emotionally, right, very early on, you're gonna be able to stay away from the biggest enemy of a pitch competition, which is this beautiful people. It's the cell phone. When people start to take out their phones while you're pitching, it will annoy you, it will frustrate you, it will make you lose track of your actual pitch. And that is a key way to not making it past first round. So one thing that one of my mentors always told me is very early on, get everybody's attention by any means necessary. And by that, usually I use a little bit of humor. Very quick. For example, me, I start by saying, raise your hand, classic, right? And it's a rhetorical question, right? Raise your hand if you think entrepreneurs need money to start and scale their businesses. And then people usually laugh. The judges laugh. I remember Lora laughing as well, but they engage. And then you're asking them to do something physical. So please raise your hand if, right? And at that point, at least I have your attention. And then I have, just like any video, any content creation, in my opinion, you have about 5 to 10 seconds to really get them to be emotionally invested in listening to you. That's why I think humor can often do this. Rashmi's right, the hook. Some people call it the hook. Some people call it the memorable moment. You have to catch people's attention early on, or else, just like content creation, they will tune out. They will tune into their phone, into the matrix, and they will tune out of whatever you have to say. And pitches, as much as we don't like to say it, are really, really anchored into energy. We're all human beings, walking batteries. We're all emitting energies, consuming energy from one another. So if your energy's right, you have a good hook, and in the first 10 seconds, you're able to get a laugh or an action from the audience, including the judges, chances are you are going to deliver something fairly decent. So that's how I would start any pitch, and that would be my advice, to structure, at least start the beginning of your pitch with something emotional, a good hook, and potentially getting people to laugh or engage physically with what you have to say.
And I feel like the laugh, because again, I remember your pitch. I've seen you pitch a few times now, Thierry. It also kind of relaxes people a little bit as well.
Right.
And you know, because sometimes when you're watching someone on stage, you know, you want them to do their best, and so you're sort of nervous for them. So
For them. Exactly.
you're relaxing the room with just a lighthearted joke.
That's it.
And then it feels a little less formal, if you will. It's, you know, and you're just up there telling a story
That's
to
it.
judges. Yeah. So I love both of your angles on approaching setting the tone, I guess,
Correct.
of what you're doing. And when it comes to the practicing aspect, because I know that some people, it's such a daunting thing to learn off a 2-minute pitch or a 3-minute pitch. That's a lot of it's a lot of information for you to learn, especially if you want to be talking about numbers or talking about your market. So there's percentages involved. Can you talk us through how you went around practicing and refining it so that it didn't just feel like you were reading from a script, but it was just sort of ebbing and flowing out of out of you? Rashmi, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think the first thing to remember is that you know your business better than anyone else in the entire world, right? And I think having that mindset and that confidence is so important. I think confidence is key when you're doing these pitches, because 90% of the time I forget what I'm saying, and you know, have my confidence, and it just pulls me into like another chain of thought that I can keep talking. But I think when it comes to these pitches, like 3 minutes, it's kind of hard to do that. So it is important to practice quite often. I feel like at this point I could probably say my pitch in my sleep, and I probably do sleep talk my pitch sometimes. And I think the one thing that really helps me is like not having like it word to word memorized, but rather like points. So like I break it down into points that I want to talk about. And then I know like the key point that I'm going to hit. And so when I have those points, then I'm able to talk about it in a more human way. Because if you've got a script, then what ends up happening is you come across very robotic, and it's hard to like pull out the emotion that way. It's hard to like do anything that makes it engaging, as I mentioned earlier. So I think having points and speaking to those points, and then just practicing it over and over and timing yourself as you're practicing it, because again, 3 minutes is not a lot of time. And you know, we like to talk as entrepreneurs. We want to talk about everything. We know the nitty-gritty details, and we want to tell you everything. And that's not what we're able to do. So practice a lot. Make sure you've got the points down, and you practice with emotion too. I think a lot of people, when they're doing this and getting into the world of entrepreneurship, it's actually quite uncomfortable to like pitch with emotion, because it almost feels like you're acting a little bit. But like, you know, when we talk on a day-to-day basis, where we try to be more like relaxed and not as excited when we're talking. And I think that as an entrepreneur, you just have to let that out. Like, this is super cool what you're working on. You have to build up that excitement. You have to let it exude out of your body when you're talking. And yeah, that's what I would recommend.
And I love your point about not having it word for word scripted. 'Cause I know for me anyway, if I'm trying to learn something off by heart, if I lose my place or I forget one thing, you've kind of lost the rest of it, because you're relying on one step after the other. And
Exactly.
whereas with having it as a point, it's you're allowing for that you're allowing space for the humanness that you'll bring.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Exactly. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
the humanness, but also like understanding that it's not about perfection as well. It's about communicating things properly. And then just having the confidence that you'll be able to do that. I think confidence is like the biggest step to pitching, I've realized. Like, truly, if you struggle with confidence, like that is something you need to work on as like step one in order to be successful with pitching. And once you and it's totally a mindset, you know, like once you switch on that confidence in your head, you can go and pitch basically anything in the world. I'm convinced.
Yeah. And Thierry, how did you practice your pitch to get it to this compelling and engaging state?
Yeah. I'm actually, I agree with not knowing it by heart, but I would lie if I said that I must have done at least 100 pitch on stage over the past 3 years. And we've been blessed to win a little bit under $1 million of pitch competition prize globally in 3 years. And one thing that I like to do is actually compartmentalize my pitch in sections based on what I'm about to go pitch. For example, you have, let's say, your hook. Your hook is going to be 5 seconds. I'll have an Excel sheet. I'll put hook 5 seconds. Then that's my hook. Then I'll go into the problem I'm tackling. I actually use the Kawasaki model for my pitch, and I translate that into a pitch competition. So I'll have a deck, and then each deck, and I highly advise, I know that Startup Canada is a pitch with no deck, but there is so much power in memorizing your deck to the words that go with your deck, because if you bug on stage, one thing that your memory will be able to pick on easier than words is going to be go to that deck page. And that has been a super secret weapon of mine. So I'll go problem, solution. And then if you deconstruct your pitch, you're going to realize on your Excel sheet that each page is usually on a 3-minute pitch at Startup Canada, anywhere between 13 seconds to 20 seconds. So don't memorize all 13 to 20 seconds of each page, but memorize keywords or ideas you want to convey. That way, instead of memorizing a 3-minute long pitch, you're going to be able to say, hey, Startup Canada, let's say, does not care about the SAM-TAM. Let me focus on the problem, the solution, the go-to-market strategy, right? And maybe an investor pitch or another pitch in Taiwan or Portugal doesn't care about the go-to-market strategy. So depending on what Startup Canada wants, identify the slides that go with what they want. I personally like to memorize keywords and ideas that I want to drive. So I'll have my Excel sheets, and then I won't revise the entire pitch in one shot. I'll revise each slides word by word. And my secret weapon is I pitch it to 2 different generations. That was another mentor of mine that told me this. And by 2 generations, I pitch it to my mom and I pitch it to my grandma. And if I could get them to laugh, and I could get them to understand what I'm doing within a good, I'd say 60 to 120 seconds, usually I'm going to have a decent pitch going to wherever I'm going based on the criterias of the pitch competition itself. But what it does is, you know your pitch by heart, you've structured it. When I pitch it to these 2 folks, my mom, she doesn't know nothing about technology, right? And my grandma, even worse. So pitching to these 2 folks has been my secret weapon. And then I perform. We talked about that, Rashmi. It is a performance sometimes. You're not performing to VCs usually or partners, but you are performing when you're on stage. So a lot of energy, some emotions, remembering that we're all humans and we're trying to connect the best we can. And then not knowing it by heart, but remembering keywords and things you want to drive based on images is going to help you memorize your pitch a lot easier, I find.
Brilliant, excellent approach with pitching to different generations, because that again, you want to ensure, especially when you're coming from a technical background, or what you're pitching is within a space that maybe a lot of people aren't very knowledgeable in. When you listen to a pitch, it shouldn't matter that you aren't familiar with a certain sector or whatever. You should still be able to comprehend what
Exactly
is trying to convey to you, whether you are a judge, whether you are an audience member. You want to leave those 3 minutes, want to leave the audience after those 3 minutes for them to understand exactly what you do.
Got it.
Yeah. Lora, from the judge's aspect, are there any key elements maybe that Rashmi and Thierry didn't mention, but something that really will just immediately grab your attention when you're listening to all of these pitches?
Yeah, they covered everything that I was thinking. The story, you're selling yourself as much as you're selling your product, your service, your technology platform. Having that confidence, I can't agree more. But what I want to say is that as a judge, it was really hard, because the pitches were amazing. And I judged across Canada, including the grand finale, but I also judged online for the virtual pitch competition. So I was by myself and I judged 13 pitches. And so everything that you're saying, Terry and Rashmi, it's great when you're in person and you've rehearsed that, but you have to bring it that much more when you're sitting in front of a computer screen and all the judges are doing is just listening to your pitch in a little box. You can't really rely on body language. So I think that for those of you that are going to pitch virtually, I mean, you've got to really bring it and be prepared, but still let your personality shine through in that confidence. I think it's important to differentiate between the two. But I also want to say that I applaud everyone. You know, Terry and Rashmi, they've perfected their pitch. But for those of you who have never pitched, or for those that may have pitched once before and you feel that it didn't go so well, I applaud you for having the confidence to get up there. It's not easy. It's not easy. And I saw it last year. The nerves would take over some people, and the judges were human, and we want everyone to succeed. That's the thing. We want everyone to nail their pitch. And when we would see that one of the entrepreneurs was nervous, it really tugs at your heartstrings because you just want to stop them and give them a hug and say, hey, you're doing great. Like, you're up here. And we met so many entrepreneurs that it was their first time pitching. I met a lot of entrepreneurs before the event got started, like in that breakfast. And I remember in Winnipeg, and it was a student who was like a full-time student, and this was his first pitch ever. And he found out that I was going to be a judge in the afternoon. And he was like, do you have any advice? And he was so nervous. And the global piece is something that I will mention, but I said to him, well, you know, have you thought of your target markets? Have you thought of growing global? And he was like, no. And unfortunately, he didn't make it out of the first round, but he's going to learn so much from that. And like, first pitch, understanding, he really realized that he didn't understand the judging criteria. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I would just say the compelling pitches are those that, you know, confident, you let your personality shine through, you're selling yourself as much as your product or service. Do your homework. That comes through, and your ability to demonstrate the due diligence that you've done really comes through. And also, because this is a startup global competition, having that global mindset, your ability to demonstrate that you do have a global mindset, that, you know, you could have started your company in Canada and you know your Canadian market very well. But you have to be able to demonstrate that you do have a willingness and an interest in growing global.
Thanks so much, Laura. And yeah, it is such a important thing to outline, like doing your due diligence. Thierry, yeah, jump right in.
Yes, I'd like to rebound off this. Listen, everybody who's listening today, did you hear what Lora said? Lora said that some folks, because they have it's your first time. You have the courage. That's what she talked about. Imagine having the courage to step online, on stage, and literally bare your soul in something you believe wholeheartedly in. But she said something so I think precious. She said that sometimes when you get on stage and you might not have the confidence, she just wants to go out there and give you a hug and say, don't stop, keep going. But when Laura's doing that, the whole audience will, all the judges are thinking it. They're not listening necessarily to your pitch because they feel a certain way about the situation you're in. That predicament that you're in on stage, all other people will feel it for you. And what ends up happening is they might tune out just because preparation does not mean opportunity. So I don't want to stress it too much, but there is such a thing that if you get on stage and you've prepared and rehearse, Lora can actively listen to you and the audience as well, because they don't feel like you need to be hugged or pushed or encouraged. And it's a human thing. It has not, it triggers automatically. We do it. I do it. Sometimes I'm in pitch competition all over the world and I'm like, this is over preparation and this is under prepared, right? You could see it right away. This person over prepared, this person under prepared. And there's like a smooth middle that needs to be understood so that the pitch itself could be memorable. And if you want to be memorable, Lora has to be focused on what you have to say instead of feeling like, oh my God, I just wish I could give them a hug. And that's a normal thing. The audience will feel like that. The judges will feel like that. So show up prepared, make sure you know it. And if you do mess up, let your personality and your energy come out. And that's where the confidence and Rashmi is so right. You know your business, storytell, get out there, have fun. Don't take yourself too seriously either, right? And roll with the punches because they will come. You're going to freeze, you're going to forget. But if you're able to stay confident and keep going with your storytelling, both the audience and Lora won't feel like giving you a virtual hug and they'll be able to focus on what you have to say.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Thierry, for bouncing back on that. And yeah, completely agree with that. And yeah, Lora and all the judges, they really do just want you to succeed. You know, they need to choose a winner. So show them why they should be selecting you, really. Lora, I wanted to also ask you about, you know, important elements maybe that you find are commonly missed or overlooked by entrepreneurs. However, I do see that Venice has asked in the chat, and so maybe I'll reword my question a little bit, I guess. Venice is wondering in terms of what exactly it means in terms of showing global willingness. Does that mean does it show that you have some sales outside of Canada? Does it show your market potential? So I guess I'll reword the question to, in terms of elements that are important to the Startup Global Pitch competition, the most important thing is having an ability or an intent to go global. So when you're listening to the pitches, how are you assessing that intent or ability? What can a pitch
Yeah, so
be?
I mean, it's a great question and it's part of the criteria. And I know we're going to go over, and I think there was another question about the judging criteria. So the judging criteria, I know it's published. I've seen it because I just downloaded it, and the judges do judge based on that criteria, and we go through each one. And I'll go into a little bit more detail, like when we talk about target market, etc. But to answer the question, the willingness to grow global, we know that companies who export are more successful. And we also know that you're not too small to grow global. Doesn't matter, it doesn't mean that you have to be a big enough size. There's not a big enough size to actually sell in international markets. So you got to remember that. So this program is assessing you, and the competition is assessing you on your ability to grow global, your ability to scale globally. So if you've just started, if you're a true startup and you're just trying to get some traction in the domestic market, you have to keep in mind that you have to think strategically long term. So strategically, yes, you're trying to gain traction in the domestic market, but you might be looking at evaluating opportunities in international markets. And you need to take a strategic approach to that. You can't just throw out some markets just to say, oh yeah, that looks good in my pitch, I'm going to go to Europe. So that's one that's one thing. So doing your due diligence, understanding how to screen markets for potential for your particular product or service is paramount. So understanding, show the judges that you've done a little bit of homework, that you understand other markets that have the most potential for your product and service, even if you haven't started developing business in those markets. At least have one or two markets identified that once we gain traction in the next, and use timelines, in the next 2 years, maybe, where we'll be looking at these two markets. We know that, they have potential because of XYZ, right? Some report, some key piece of data. Don't just throw out markets because you need to have them for your pitch, because judges can see right through that. And because I'm with the Forum for International Trade Training, my questions always had to do with international expansion. So every question I would ask, the pictures were about, how specifically or why did you identify this market as your target market? And since we're on the topic of target market, Europe is not one market, right? Europe is 30 markets. South America is not one target market, right? No, North America isn't even one target market.
Yeah.
So understand that a region is not a market. Get specific. So that's a piece of advice. I could keep talking. I can't even remember what the question was, other than the question that
No, that's brilliant.
answered.
No, that's really it. And yeah, Vanessa, I hope that answers your question. And we can get into the judging criteria now. I think maybe there might be a few questions from attendees around that. The judging criteria, we're seeing, I think we had around just over 700 companies total pitch for the Startup Global Pitch competition last year. It's a lot of pitches that we're going through. And so we needed to find a way that we're streamlining it, and so that the judges, we're making it as level as a playing field for everyone. So it's a verbal pitch for everyone. Everyone gets 3 minutes. Everyone gets 3 minutes of Q&A with the judges afterwards, whether they're pitching in person or virtually. And everyone's being judged off of the same criteria. We've shared the judging criteria in the chat. We can share it again if you didn't get a chance to click on the link. So the judging criteria is target market, objective, solution, leadership, traction, if any, because I know if you're starting out, also traction doesn't necessarily need to be sales or revenue. It can be we've partnered with XYZ, or we've got this many people sign up to our newsletter, or this many people want to be beta testers. Like, all those things are still showing some sort of traction for you, but it's not absolutely crucial. Your competition and how you're differentiating yourself, and then that ability or intent to go global. So that I hope that kind of outlines it for everyone. To Rashmi and Thierry, maybe Rashmi, I'll go to you first. When you were going through these judging criterias, was there any point where you're reading through it thinking, oh gosh, I don't quite know how to talk about this, especially with competition? I feel like that's the one that gets people a little nervous, because they're like, well, I don't want to talk about companies that are similar to mine, but it's actually a detriment if you don't talk about your competition. So was there any specific part of the criteria that you felt was more of a hurdle to overcome in crafting your pitch?
You know what, I think for me, I had the benefit of having gone through an accelerator that had explained like what each of these parts are. So for anyone that's listening on the call, like, I would highly encourage you to either, reach out to an accelerator or incubator, or even just look up some of these terms like in a bit more detail. Because when you're looking at your competitive, like doing the competitive analysis, one thing that I would actually recommend is talk about your competitors, but don't talk bad about them. Like, don't be derogatory, don't be rude, talk about why you're better. Obviously, like, for whatever reason, I feel like when we think about competitive analysis, like, our mind seems to go to like saying bad things, but it's so much more important to use that time to talk about good things to yourself, about yourself rather. And then in terms of the other aspect, the one that I would encourage people to look into the most, because I feel like most of them are relatively obvious, but the market sizing, I think that is not immediately obvious for a lot of people. And there's the terms like TAM, SAM, specifically the total addressable market, I think, is the most important one to talk about in this one, because it gives people an understanding of how big your market size is in a dollar value. And I think that communicating that in like a short pitch, doing it clearly and concisely is very important as well, because, if you're able to communicate the total addressable market, then the judges to a certain extent are also able to think about, okay, what does that mean in terms of what the service obtainable market will be and what they will actually be able to get and how big of an opportunity is this actually. So there's a lot of implications with just talking about just the total addressable market. So I think if I had to talk about a specific area, then I would definitely highlight that and use that as your way of communicating how big of a market opportunity and how you're planning to export into other global markets would be.
Brilliant answer, Rashmi. And Thierry, how about yourself when you were going through the criteria?
Yeah, when I was going through the criterias, once again, I go back to being memorable. If you want to make it past first rounds and make it in, the judges, Lora included, if they grasp what you've said in a short amount of time that you have to say it, which means you delivered something confidently, you drove the right emotions, hopefully you got a couple of laughs from the crowd, you're putting all the best chances on your side, right? And what we knew for a fact is when we went through all the criteria for Startup Canada, the competitive analysis is a huge one, but we also knew that if we did not talk about it too much, for example, when we got to the competitive analysis slide, which we do internationally, what we'll say is the market is this size, but it's fragmented, right? And when you have a slide, it's easy because they could look, okay, these are your competitors. So what we had was, we spent about 5 seconds on that slide. Once again, keep in mind, you have 180 seconds. And then it's a math thing. You have to say, all right, my hook is 7 seconds, 7 seconds. Us, the problem solution, the storytelling is long. We take our time there because we know that's where the emotions are connected. Oh yeah, that is a problem. Oh yeah, that needs to be solved. And when the judge go in the back, they're going to talk about which one is, okay, that's the one. That's what they're solving. Yeah, I get it. And then if they understand it, because you confidently delivered a good message, they could debate for you in the back, because that's what's going to happen. Laura's going to have a pick, somebody else going to have a pick, and then they're going to go at each other. So they're going to become either ambassadors or detractors. And you could ask Lora about who should win, right? So that's where the emotions come in. And that's where there needs to be strategic way you're putting weight and time on whatever you're spending most time on. A thing I knew about Lora, because I had researched her, and also we were blessed enough, we pitched in Moncton, we pitched at we won the US ambassador also at his residence in Ottawa. We knew that if we did not spend too much time on a competition, that question would come by the judges. So instead of wasting time on things that could potentially not be memorable in the span of 3 seconds, we focused on being memorable, being confident in our 3 minutes, knowing that somebody like Lora was for sure going to ask the question. And then we would get to spend more than 15 seconds answering that question. So here's a tip that I can promise you is going to pay massive dividends internationally, wherever you go. If you are in a pitch competition and some of the criteria don't necessarily make sense in fitting to your pitch or make you nervous, or you tend to forget that part of your pitch, know the judges so well that you know what they might ask. And also attend your competitors' pitches. If I'm pitching against Rashmi, I should watch Rashmi pitch, because then I'll think, okay, Laura's asking those questions. Game on. She'll ask me the same. So when it gets to your turn, instead of running through the slides, oh, Thierry said 7 seconds, 18 seconds. Oh my God, now you waste your pitch. Laura's going to ask you the question. You're going to get 25 seconds. And she might ask you a rebound question if your answer is really strong or she wants precisions on it. So that would be an advice I would give for anybody listening right now.
No, it's brilliant way of going about it, Thierry. And I always say, in the past when we've had entrepreneurs who are pitching, one of the most common questions we get is what questions are they going to ask? And I mean, I have to say, I don't know.
Legit.
But what I typically will say is, they'll usually ask you a question either around something that they want to know more about that you mentioned in your pitch, or they noticed something was missing in your pitch.
There you go.
They need clarification. So if you didn't mention competition, you're probably going to get a question about who your competition is. So it's a fantastic way to think about it as well. And yeah, to that point, if there's certain information where you're like, I'll just tease it, I'll kind of you'll mention it to be like, I'm
There
aware
you go.
and you know, like you're teasing information, and then one of the judges would be like, well, let's talk more about that. And it's
That's it.
actually 3 minutes after your pitch to answer a few questions, so you will have a longer time. And Laura, I'll put it to you as well. What because I know when you're actively listening to a pitch, you're sort of going through the criteria and you're kind of weighing them each up. How often does it happen where you are then in the Q&A section and you're asking a question and it's tipped you maybe one way or the other from what you've asked and what answer you've gotten?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to piggyback on what Terry said, and I was going to mention that too. Know the judges. So my background is international trade. So of course I'm going to be the one that asks about global expansion. If there's a banker someone from the banking industry, you know, they're going to ask you about your revenue streams, and then UPS could ask you anything. So be prepared. But I tend to, because I've also taught international trade and international sales and marketing for over a decade, and I'm used to evaluating students and their projects. And so I'm looking, I'm looking for those pitfalls. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm looking for, if somebody mentions a target market as Europe or Asia, I'm like, oh, that's a red flag, because that means that you haven't truly identified your target market. So don't have me listening for those pitfalls, right? Like target market, or poking holes at where you might not have really thought about growing global. So like even things like, if something seems too cookie cutter. So let's say this is your go-to-market strategy in Canada, but understanding enough that when you grow global, when you expand globally, your international sales and marketing plan, your go-to-market strategy isn't necessarily the same. So if you're looking at marketing, how you place your product in the market, how you promote it, how you price it, and how, you know, what your product is, you might have to modify your product or adapt. So that marketing mix cannot be cookie cutter. So understanding enough that if you say target market is Spain, and we're going to enter the market through, we've identified a key distributor, we've already initiated talks, and then maybe, I don't know, Sweden, and we're going to go direct to consumer. Bam, you got my attention, because you understand that each target market, even if you're not currently exporting to that market, but you've thought that you need to adapt your strategy for each market you're going to go into. So I would be all ears. I wouldn't have further questions, but if you throw out something which is very vague just to appease the judges, I'm going to try to poke holes in that.
Mm. Excellent point there, Laura. And Rashmi, I don't know if you've anything to add in terms of like navigating those questions that you're getting after your pitch, and maybe there's questions you got in the past, or you know, questions you got from pitching at Startup Canada a couple of years ago that made you kind of reshift or redesign your pitch for future events.
Well, I think once you start doing enough pitches, you start noticing the holes in your pitch, and the questions that you get are the same every single time. And so you can actually use that to your advantage and leave intentional holes in your pitch for these questions to be asked. And when they do get asked, you know what you're going to be asked, and you can have a properly thought out answer to these questions. The one thing that I found was really, really beneficial of pitch competitions, just generally for me, was identifying the areas that I hadn't thought about from people that have experience, so just going up on stage, going and talking to people and like pitching to them, and then, getting asked certain questions allowed me to refine my pitch over and over and over. And I'm pretty sure I'm like on a version 1,000,000 at this point. But like, I think it was really valuable, all of the questions that were asked. But once you eventually get to a point where the questions that get asked are the same every single time. And so once you have that, then you're able to very affluently talk about what it is that they're asking about.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I know we're talking a lot about Startup Global and the pitch competition because we really want to ensure that anyone who would like to participate this year is as well equipped as possible to be successful and hopefully win some of the money that we have up for grabs. But also it's worthwhile mentioning that this is only one type of pitch that you'll have to have as a business owner. There's so many different types of pitches that you're going to need to have it like, right in your back pocket when you're a business owner, and knowing which scenario to pull out the right one for. So to Thierry, I'll go to you first, maybe. Um, what's your approach in delivering these different pitches and how you're adjusting the content?
Love it.
Also, sometimes, especially if you're investing to um an investor, for example, you always need to have an ask at the end of it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's with a deck. So
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think it's an excellent question. And a lot of us as founders, especially when you're a tech founder, you tend to think that you have the best tech in the world. We all think we have the best tech in the world, first and foremost. And even for non-tech founders, you genuinely think that what you are trying to solve for is really important. It's important to you, right? I think what I've learned with the art of pitching, which is essentially communication, selling, right? But it's really communication, is a lot of people want to know what's in it for them before you talk about what's in it for you, first and foremost. And then secondly is you might be passionate about the problem or the solution you have, but you should be passionate, obviously, about the problem that you're solving. And in terms of pitches, we have about 15 different pitches at Happly. And how we came up with 15 different pitches is for any successful founder out there, you're going to learn very rapidly that your ability to sell or communicate what you are solving and how you are solving it better than other people, it is going to be something you're going to have to master in the pitch world because you're going to pitch all the time. I've met data scientists that are like almost curing cancer, but their inability to communicate and convince partners, you have to pitch partners, clients, you have to pitch clients, employees, you have to pitch employees, especially in today's world. Why would I go work for you? We're in a tech space and AI, when I could go work and make 150, 250,000 US, right? Well, here's why. And then I pull out my pitch, and that's my employee pitch. And then I get as passionate as I am right now. And they feel it. And they're like, you know what? I want to work for this insane man because he sounds like he's really trying to solve this. And I could work for Google. So you're always pitching. You're pitching at networking events. You're pitching. So I can't stress enough that as brilliant as you may be, as good as your product, physical or technological as it may be, your ability to convey it in a human way that resonate with people listening to what you are depositing is going to be key to your success. And again, we have 15 pitch: employee pitch, a partner pitch, client pitch, a VC pitch, on-state pitch, Canadian pitch, Asian. I don't pitch in Asia the way I pitch in North America. Never. There's some jokes that I'll say that will never land. And I learned it the hard way in Taiwan. It's called crickets. And it's not that fun. But you know what? You got to roll with the punches. And that's one thing I think we tend to forget as entrepreneurs. We have all the good intentions in the world, but we forget that the most important thing about our business is our ability for people to buy into what we have to sell. So pitch. And at Happly, I'll give you a little last tip. We run in-house pitch competition. So all our employees from every department crafts pitches. And then when we have our in-office events, you would not believe the amount of nuggets I've incorporated in different pitches from our software engineer, who's the most introverted person you'll ever meet in your life. But he came up with some way to tell the way we have an edge about this part. That was amazing. Our operations person, I now have 50% of my pitch, thanks to Ravita, Queen Ravita, like I call her, is incorporated in how I pitch employees because Ravita has nailed it better than I have, right? So don't underestimate the power of asking your employee in-house to go through this exercise of pitching 60 seconds on your Showcase Friday. Hey, everybody, round table, pitch competition. And then a little free lunch on us, Uber Eats, whatever. And then you'll be shocked how much value you could get out to iterating your own pitch for any kind of purposes you have in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Thierry. And I'm sure people can tell, you know, Thierry's and Rashmi's as well, the energy that they're bringing with their questions is even is no match for what when they're on live pitching themselves as well. Or sorry, is match. I said no match, it is a match for when they're pitching on stage as well. Laura, yeah, you have something to add.
Yeah, I was just I'm listening to Thierry and like it's amazing that you've pitched so much, but I also want to go back to the, you know, those entrepreneurs that have never pitched. And I saw that there's a question, you know, do you need to be incorporated before you pitch? I don't know if that's part of your criteria, but what I want to say is that even if you're small, you've never pitched before, when you're in the preliminary rounds, if you have an opportunity to speak to those judges, what, you know, to get feedback, what did I, you know, how do you think it went? Like, do you have any advice for me? Do that, because that's the way you're going to learn. So if you have an opportunity, talk to those judges. And because I remember across Canada, there were some, you know, talking to the other judges from the morning session, you know, they would tell us about different pitches that they heard. And really, I think every judge tries to help the entrepreneurs because everybody wants them to succeed. So they give them pointers. And there was one big thing, and this is you mentioned something about partnerships, Isabel. Like, even if you don't have traction doesn't always mean sales, but talk about those partnerships that you've for those key partners. There was one company that pitched, and she had a key partner, and she never mentioned that. And so one of the judges told her, like, saw it in her deck after the fact, and she said, why didn't you lead with this? So if you're pitching for the first time, you're going to make mistakes. You might not lead with the right messaging, or you might leave out really important things. So try to talk to those judges and just have the courage to start. You've got to start somewhere.
And I feel like this is something I've said to a lot of people, and it comes from a previous boss that I had, is that you only have to do something for the first time once. Get up, do it, and then you've done it. And then that like scary part of doing it for the first time is done. And then now you can just keep moving on, and then you're just gonna start racking up your numbers about how many times you've pitched. I'm cognizant of time, so I want to get to some of the questions that we have both in the Q&A and the chat box. I might ask one final question to our speakers, and then I'll go into the a little bit more details about eligibility for the pitch competition and whether you're pitching in person or virtually. So one question is from Janet, asking about standard number of slides to be presented in a pitch deck. I think it depends on who you're providing the deck to, typically around 10 or so. You really don't want it to be too long. But you know, if it's for an investor, there's a lot more information you're going to be providing them. I will say for the Startup Global pitch competition, it is a verbal pitch only, so no pitch deck. If you are a product, you can bring your product if it's sort of a small product with you to show during your pitch, but no deck is required. In terms of the anonymous attendee asking about if you're in the process of incorporation, you don't need to be incorporated to pitch at our pitch competition, so that's absolutely no problem. So I think that's everything there. And then I saw one or two here. Kansu is asking about the virtual pitch competition. Yes, we'll be reaching out to everyone next week. Once you meet the eligibility, so we have 4 pieces of eligibility, which is intent, ability to export or go global, less than $1 million in revenue as of February 3rd of this year, less than $1 million in fundraising or investments as of February of this year. You're 5 years or less in business as of February 3rd this year. And you have businesses or operations within Canada. So that is the eligibility. So if you meet each part of those criteria, you'll receive an email from our program lead, Miriam Wedge, on what those next steps are. So that's for whether you're virtual or in person. I think I saw someone asking if you're in Saskatoon, can you pitch virtually? Absolutely. The reason we have our virtual pitch competition is for anyone who's not located in the cities that we're going to this year, which is currently Vancouver, Moncton, Calgary, and Mississauga. So you're welcome to pitch virtually if you're not in any of those cities. It is an either or though, so you can either pitch virtually or you can either pitch in person, just so we can ensure that there's spots available for as many people as possible. And the criteria has been shared. Cool, I think we're good. So, and the recording, yes, the recording will be shared on our YouTube channel afterwards. So if you missed anything, any resources that were shared, we will share all of that with you. So I'm going to launch our feedback poll. And while you're answering that, I'm going to have the judges give us a quick fire one piece of advice, or maybe beyond the cash prize, because of course, yes, cash is king, and we'd love to get some money into our pockets. But in addition to that, what are the other benefits that participating in the pitch competition can provide entrepreneurs? Rashmi, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I actually have to hop off right after this call and go do my pitch. So I'm trying to think of advice for myself as well. It's for an investor pitch, but basically the advice that I would give is have fun with it. I think we spend so much time stressing out about everything, but having fun with it lets the people receiving the pitch enjoy it as well and understand it. And I think having fun with it is great. I think in terms of beyond the cash prize, what was really valuable was one, this was like the first time that I had like pitched to an audience after I moved to Nova Scotia. And this is the pitch that everyone remembers me by now. They're like, oh, I saw you at Startup Canada. And even like years later, they still remember me by it. And I met so much of my community there, people that I consider my closest friends and like my trusted like peers now. So it's an incredible opportunity to build a community around yourself, which I think is, worth millions of dollars, if I'm being honest. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thierry, one thing in addition to the cash.
So for me, last thing I'll say, body language also. Don't underestimate the power of your body language on that stage. The power of a pause. Sometimes it actually works really well for you, a strategic pause. And I'll say joining the community. I love what Rashmi said. I'm going to echo what she said. The brand Startup Canada is extremely strong globally. I could confirm that. And don't underestimate the importance of joining. It takes a village, right? And Startup Canada's village is a pretty powerful one. And not power no more, Star Wars, Dark Empire power, but power in terms of if you are good to the ecosystem will be good to you. If you're positive, we've done a podcast with Startup Canada. We're hoping for more stuff to come out of Startup Canada. So bring your best foot forward, stay positive, join this movement and this village will pour into you as much as you pour into it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Thierry. And Lora.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit is that we're all lifelong learners. And if the last 2 months have taught us anything, it's taught us to diversify our markets, and to learn how you can navigate through these, geopolitical situations and complexities. If all your eggs are in one basket, and you're not diversifying, that is not good. Whether you're not diversifying and only looking at the Canadian market or US customers, you need to diversify. You need to constantly be scanning, learning, evaluating opportunities. So on that note, I just wanted to share that If the whole startup and you being judged on your ability to scale and grow global, if that's all daunting and you really haven't given it much thought and you don't know where to start, FITT's created just launched a new resource. It's called the Export Vision Board. And so that forces you to think about, what does exporting look like for your company? And so it takes you through 9 areas of consideration, and it's good to go through that exercise. So if you do get asked a question, you think like key partnerships. Hey, you've worked that out. You kind of think who the key partnerships are. How are you going to make money and target markets? So Miriam just dropped it in the chat. You're welcome to download it. Just have to fill in name, email, and that's a really good tool. It's a template that you fill in. You should do that before you pitch so that you have the answers in your head.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura. And yes, please, FITT are such a wealth of knowledge within exporting in general. So they're a great resource and tool for no matter where you are in your exporting journey. So please do check out that resource. Okay, that is it. We packed a lot into 1 hour, and thank you to everyone who attended for taking time out of your day to join us and listen in to our wonderful speakers' advice. So of course, I give a massive thank you to Rashmi. I know she had to jump off to do her own investor pitch, so wish her well on that. To Thierry and to Laura for donating your time and expertise and bringing all the energy as well. It takes a lot to show up for sessions like these, even when they're virtual. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give one final thank you to our co-presenting partners, UPS and Export Development Canada, as well as our program partners, TD Bank and Forum for International Trade Training, as well as GS1 Canada, Communitech, and WBC as our community partners. Our next webinar is the Entrepreneurs Going Global panel that will be taking place on May 8th. We'll be dropping the link below. And I hope that this has given you a better line of sight of exactly what is anticipated for the pitch competition, whether you're pitching virtually or in person, or maybe you were on the fence about doing it, and now maybe hopefully we've pushed you into the right direction of doing it. So if you have any follow-up questions, we'll put an email into the chat there. It's global@startupcan.ca. And any questions around applying, but honestly, my advice, just apply. If you feel like you're not at that point yet to pitch, or you're not quite sure, let the judges decide if you're ready or not, or if your pitch is good or not. Don't hold yourself back from that opportunity. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll hopefully see you pitching very soon. Take care. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Stay blessed, highly favored.